So the first thing I really wanted to talk about is the fact that London Fashion Week is being cancelled, which is insane, by the way, like absolutely insane. But the writing was also on the wall. I've been talking about this for the longest time. I've talked about the fact that London Fashion Week has slowly been declining as time has progressed, especially since Brexit. Brexit made it so that it wasn't really worthwhile for a lot of models to come to London anymore. It didn't make sense for a lot of buyers, international press to come to London. So all of them kind of just skip London now and they all go to Milan and Paris, but specifically Paris. I then talked about how this has led to a lot of fashion designers in London having to all have showrooms in Paris because that's where all the buyers are. And I mean, you have to show your clothing where the buyers are. It's quite funny because it's so different to when you think of fashion in the past. If we're talking about even the story of the Antwerp Six, right? The story of the Antwerp Six, they went to a trade show in London where all the buyers were, and a buyer from Barney's actually discovered the Antwerp Six, and that's what made the Antwerp Six what they are today. So different, completely different fashion industry now, where most of the buyers aren't even in London anymore, apart from buyers from the stores that are in London in the first place, like Selfridges and Machine A and stores like that. So the writing has been on the wall for the downfall of London Fashion Week for a very long time now. I think I've kind of seen it slowly decline. I've seen every designer that builds any sort of prominence in the fashion industry, all of them moved to Paris or Milan. We saw that with Samuel Ross's A Cold War moving to Milan. We've seen Martine Rose do shows in Milan. We've seen Kiko Kostadanov do shows in Paris. So a lot of the London designers have moved away for better opportunities. And so this kind of, I think, is something that has culminated into this decision to cancel London Fashion Week in June. So let's read the article. British Fashion Council cancels London Fashion Week June edition. The BFC is focusing on its showroom in Paris in June in lieu of a standalone fashion week. So the British Fashion Council has cancelled its June edition of London Fashion Week. Instead, the focus will shift to providing more commercial opportunities for British brands through a London showroom showcase in Paris, which will run from June 26th to the 1st of July. Now, the very interesting thing about that is that this has always been a thing. Like, they've always focused on showrooms for these London designers. So I wonder kind of what's different, or is it just more focus, I guess? And how will that higher level of focus look like? Like, what would that look like? I'm very interested to figure that out. I will be going to Paris Fashion Week in June, so I will be looking into that to see exactly what's going on there because I'm curious. Also, London in general has not really been where business is really done, especially in fashion. London is more seen as the creative hub where designers who want to start their own brands typically are allowed to thrive, where places like Milan and Paris, the focus is more on the big brands. When you go to Paris Fashion Week, everyone's talking about the Balenciaga show, the Courrèges show, the Dior show, the LV show. When you go to Milan, it's all about Prada, it's about Dolce & Gabbana, it's about Versace, these kind of brands. So it's very different in London. In London, we do have big brands like Burberry, but the focus tends to be on the Simone Rochers and the Erdem's and these kind of brands. And it's always been that creative hub that harnesses the creative talent of younger designers and emerging talent. And Paris and Milan has more just been big business. So it's always been that way. So when they say they're moving to Paris to focus on the showrooms, I'm curious because that's kind of always been a thing anyway. It's always been a thing there. But reading on, the BFC's outgoing CEO, Caroline Rush, hopes the showroom will provide an opportunity for designers to generate sales and develop their relationships with international media outside of the show environment, reinforcing our commitment to providing vital commercial opportunities for British designers. And that's such a good point, although I don't know if it's going to build the designers the way they think it will, because this international press, a lot of it is predicated around the runway shows, not so much the showrooms. When I look at people's content around Fashion Week, it tends to be a lot of runway reviews, backstage kind of content. people don't really go to showrooms and film and talk to people at the showrooms. People should. I think people should, because it's more slower paced than the showroom, and actually you have more time to talk to the team and they can really run you through all the garments one by one. But for some reason, maybe brands don't focus their strategy on that. But a lot of the content and a lot of the focus on the press is not around showrooms. Like, you don't see ID magazine and Vogue writing about what's going on in brand showrooms. It's mainly runway reviews, right? Especially during Fashion Week. So once again, I'll be curious to see exactly how they cover that, how exactly they're going to get people to the showrooms and to make really engaging content, and how they're going to get the press to write about the clothes. I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. But reading on, the BFC reintroduced its Paris showroom in September 2024 for SS25 after a hiatus following January 2023. Since September, the BFC has been rethinking the commercial support for the region's emerging and independent brands. In February, for Autumn Winter 25, the BFC introduced the pop-up London Fashion Week shop on Regent Street, which featured brands including Ahluwalia, Nicholas Daley and Saul Nash, and was open to the public. The London Fashion Week June edition was initially launched with a menswear focus as London Collections Men. Yeah, that was literally the London Collections Men is what became London Fashion Week Men's in London. Okay, they even said it, which was then rebranded to London Fashion Week Men's in 2017. In its heyday, exciting brands such as Alexander McQueen, Jimmy Anderson, Wales Bunner, and Craig Green attracted an engaged international audience. In June 2020, the event turned co-ed as show formats began shifting that way more broadly and was presented digitally during the 2020 and 2021 COVID seasons. So apart from obviously a lot of people saying that their garments are unisex and therefore a lot of the coverage of shows became co-ed, I think part of the reason why shows became co-ed, once again, was because there was less press coming and it just didn't make sense to have all the different separate, fashion weeks. I don't think it was worthwhile for the brands or for the BFC, to be very honest. So that's another reason why. I don't think it was just because people started to say, well, I make menswear and women's wear anyway, it's unisex, so I might as well show co-ed. I think there's more at play than that, to be honest. But reading on, after the pandemic, the event returned with a smaller but still buzzy edition in 2022, featuring shows from exciting newcomers at the time, such as Ahluwalia, Labrum London, and Robin Lynch, as well as an off-schedule show from Martine Rose. The June 2020 schedule shrunk considerably, featuring a handful of presentations from Saul Nash, SMR Days, and Kissimmee Rising. And in 2024, the BFC trialed a new format centered around an exhibition of London design at the Institute of Contemporary Art, as well as events celebrating the cultures that have impacted London's menswear scene. There were a few shows, Denzel Patrick, Charles Jeffrey Loverboy, and Kissimmee, and a presentation from Harry. As the June edition shrunk, exposure dwindled, leaving many brands feeling it was no longer commercially viable to show in London during the week, which is something I've definitely alluded to multiple times, that London Fashion Week was almost becoming not worthwhile for a lot of these brands, which is why they go to Paris and do the showrooms in the first place. I literally, because showing is actually very expensive unless you're, funded in London. There are many people that could fund you. Some people are funded by the BFC, like if you're a BFC scholar or, you're part of BFC New Gen, or you could be funded by Fashion East if you're part of Fashion East. But if you're not funded by one of these initiatives, it's really expensive and you have to do the maths. Like, if there's no international press, really, the international buyers aren't coming, why would you spend all this money to show in London when you can just not show, but instead have a showroom and put all of your budget into having this like really good showroom in Paris? It didn't really make any sense. It started to just not make any sense, to be honest. But reading on, to tackle this, the BFC says the June showroom will make menswear its focus and that it plans to collaborate with buyers and press both locally and internationally through a digital-first approach. By scaling back to more targeted programs this June in London and Paris, we aim to create strong foundations to amplify the message of our brilliant British menswear business, says Rush. We recognise the challenges the sector faces both in the UK and globally, and remain committed to amplifying the voices of British menswear designers as they navigate an ever-changing fashion landscape and we'll continue to adapt and find ways to platform our brilliant British menswear business. And I think something I've always appreciated about, the British brands is that there really is a space to allow or give a voice to emerging talent. And that's something I've always loved about London and appreciated about it. But you have to make things commercially viable. And for a lot of brands, showing, especially in a place where the press coverage is not there, the media is not there, it just didn't make any sense to continue spending all that money investing in London Fashion Week. So I think they've done the right thing. I think they've actually done right by the brands. Yes, it's not good that, I live in London, I'm from London. It's quite sad that these things are slowing down. But, I care about the well-being of these designers. Once again, fashion is a really difficult business. And I think they've made the right decision focusing on the showrooms in Paris, to be very honest. And I do appreciate, of course, we have the Simone Rocha, her latest collection on the screen. I appreciate designers like Simone Rocha, who is big enough now, prominent enough to where she could show elsewhere, but she's always decided to be a mainstay of London Fashion Week, even when so many other designers have kind of jumped ship. So that's something I do appreciate from Simone Rocha. And of course, Simone Rocha's brand is obviously a very well-loved brand across the whole of the UK, to be honest, and beyond. David said, honestly, showrooms are a better way to interact with clothing, in my opinion. It's more tactile. I totally agree. I just think in terms of press coverage, it isn't there when it comes to the showrooms. That's all. That's all. You've even lost Paul Smith, who's moving the show to Milan. Yeah, many brands have left London to show, to be honest. So many. And rightfully so, it makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world. I adore Russia. I adore Simone Rocha too. Yes, also, that's very true. He'll always show in London, which is because Erdem does really good business. So Erdem could definitely show elsewhere, like in Milan Fashion Week or in Paris, actually. But they've decided to be mainstays of the London scene. I really do appreciate that. I really, really do. So yeah, that's kind of the update on London Fashion Week. And those are my quick thoughts on where London Fashion Week stands. I really would love to see, and I'm going to report back as to how exactly they implement all of these things during Paris Fashion Week. So that will be a very interesting thing to think about when it happens. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.